Hello everyone, welcome to the Lungleng show. Today we have one very interesting guest, and with him we have been trying to catch up and see when he can come up to Kohima or to our studio so that we can have this conversation. I think he's none other than Reverend Dr. Chingmak Chang, and he's very well known. I think we will not introduce much about him because we want his story to speak to all of us. I think all of us know a lot about him and his work that they have been doing, especially in the eastern districts of Nagaland. Now they're slowly moving towards some pockets of the other districts as well, in this side as well. I think it's such a privilege to have a person like him in our midst. At the same time, we are fortunate as people that we have someone like him in our society to do all these kinds of impactful and very inspiring works. I think he is someone like light that prepares a way for us to see what we can do as individuals in our life and how we can contribute to our society. It's such a privilege and honor to be in his presence and to talk about his works and to talk a lot about his thoughts. And he's the co-founder of the very well-known organization known as Eleutheros Christian Society, in short ECS, and they have been doing amazing works. They have started this work with healthcare, of course, just to shed a little bit of light on this organization. And I think beyond healthcare, ECS has significantly ventured into education, water sanitation, and myriad of livelihood projects, especially in the eastern districts. And we're so glad that he is here today to talk to us on these things. So thank you, Reverend Dr. Chingmak Chang.
Thank you so much.
Showing up on our show and to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
You hardly come to Dimapur and Kohima because you are mostly based in Tuensang.
Yes.
So it's very rare opportunity to be able to catch up with you like this today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to understand. When normally conventionally when we do a lot of social works it's related to NGO and all, I think we want to set up in urban areas and stay in the urban areas. I think, but you are staying most of the time in Tuensang, where hardly anybody wants to stay in this current context because accessibility and communication is very difficult. Like, how are you coping up your life staying in such a remote place?
Yeah. So I think as a young person, when I graduated and I started work, it was a coincidence in a sense, which in many ways I would say it was some sort of a divine guidance where my wife had to go back after our wedding. She was to go back to Hong Kong. She was working among children prostitutes. And my plan was to continue my further studies. Somehow this scholarship didn't work, and the villagers came to me and said, we don't know whatever your plans are, but we want you to be a pastor. So I go to this tiny village near Burma, and then we live there. And in fact, that is where we saw poverty up front, because I did my schoolings in a boarding school. I was always out of home. So we never really got to understand rural life. So in that sense, I call it the divine intervention, where I stayed in the community, where we saw, epidemics happening. In just 1 year, I conducted 41 burials, and most of them were children. And that really sort of shaped my purpose. I would put it that way. Because I was always looking my work from a career point of view. Get degree, get my PhD, and the hierarchy even within the church.
True.
And then come to NBCC, go to CVCNI, and that sort of a thing. But I think that idea changed when I went to this village, because it wasn't something which was planned. It was actually living within that context. But coming to your question, it was also very interesting because I found that there was so much richness in the Naga way of life. Wow. And I sort of felt that it was feeding a part of me which other things weren't feeding. And so, I have all of my friends have gone into further studies and, they've gone abroad. whereas I've continued to go further deep into
Right, that's the point.
So I think this is where I found my own calling. And also, I would rather say there was nothing much I gave. In fact, I was getting so much from, interacting with the villagers, with the community, with the rural way of life. And even today, you won't believe that even after 30, 35 years of doing social work, every morning I long to go back to the field and, visit the villages. And so this is what, so in fact, the mission of the organization is, when we were defining the mission of ECS, initially we had for the lost, for the last, and for the least. A few years down the line, we again revisited the mission statement of the organization. And we decided to say, who are we to work for the lost, for the last, and for the least? It has to be with the poor, with the lost, with the last, and with the least.
That's beautiful.
Being part of that learning process, taking the journey together. And so we made it a point never to hang it on a placard and say, this is our vision, this is our purpose. We decided we will continue to discuss and brainstorm on the vision statement, brainstorm on the mission statement, so that it is a continuous effort, And so I'm beginning to see this in the young people who join me. I'm beginning to see that initial 1 or 2 years are those teething issues which come up. The struggle between, should I go outside, should I get a government job, or should I be with ECS? And after the tipping point is crossed within 1 or 2 years, I see these young people are excited to be in the rural areas, go back to the villages. And I have some team members who got government jobs, who gave up the government job and came back to ECS.
Really?
Yeah, we have had.
That's such a rare incident in our context.
Yeah, it is. In fact, some of the parents misunderstood. And so in one case, there was a person who left twice the organization. And then the second time, after leaving the government job, he wanted to come back. So I said, hey, look, you have to speak to your parents first. Or I want to discuss with your parents, because we Nagas want our children to be only in government jobs.
Exactly.
So, so I feel as young people also, if they find the purpose, and if we define what's your purpose, then I think everything falls in place. You're willing to sacrifice for that.
Yeah.
And I think for that matter, even you, I think you found your purpose in doing this.
I think I am finding one.
And so,
not knowing where it's leading me anyway.
Yeah. And once we find the purpose, I think you would live in the desert, you would live in an island, and that wouldn't really matter, because you would want to sacrifice everything for that purpose.
I think that's really powerful. So before we jump into the next question, I would like to make a quick announcement. Our show today is sponsored by NBSC Mentors, which is a coaching center for NBSC aspirants, the Nagaland Public Service Commission. And so cracking NBSC requires the right strategy, the expert guidance, and a structured preparation. So without all of this, your effort to crack this exam can become meaningless. So you should consider about learning about the right strategy, the structured preparation, and seek for the expert guidance, which is very, very important. So NBSC Mentors offers comprehensive coaching and intensive test preparation and expert mentorship to help the aspirants succeed in this exam. So for that to happen, they have opened 4 coaching centers in Nagaland, 2 in Dimapur, 1 in Dangan, and 1 in 3rd Mile Chumukidema, and 2 in Kohima, 1 in Dinbati, and the other one in BOC. So whichever location you are familiar with and you are convenient at, please go and check this out. And the most important part is they are offering 15,000 rupees discount for the Lungleng show viewers. So if you want to access this 15,000 flat discount today, you can write a text to them with the code TLS15K, which is TLS15K, to their respective WhatsApp numbers, which we will be providing down below. So if you text to them, you will be able to access 15,000 rupees flat discount for this coaching. And you will access 7-month NBSC comprehensive foundation course through this discount. So I would like to strongly encourage, if you're seriously considering cracking this exam with a purpose, please consider NBSC Mentors Coaching Center and I'm sure you will not regret. So all the best for your preparation. You can find more information and more details below in the comment section and as well as in our description. So all the very best.
Yes,
But
it
I
is.
mean, like, before we jump into your other works, then, you know, it sounds a little philosophical, but once you find your purpose in
Yeah.
that thing,
Yeah.
sustenance comes as a challenge as well.
Yeah,
How do you advise young people? Like, okay, you find your purpose, but how do you take care of your sustenance as well?
Yeah. So,
I mean, that matters.
yeah,
All right,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. So last Christmas, I was just going through the YouTube, and there was this young person who opened up a small hotel
Okay.
in Dimapur. And I was just listening to him, and this young person said, the question was, why did you choose to open a hotel? You know, so this young person says, I want to cook. I like cooking, and I like to cook and feed people. So I think that in itself says a lot about his purpose. Secondly, he says, I want to give it at a much cheaper rate.
Wow.
I would definitely break even because I need to, the running cost has to come, but give cheaper. Now you tell me, wouldn't anyone go there?
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone would go there. So I think that was also the story of ECS. Like when my wife and we started ECS, I had 150 rupees in my pocket.
Really? You don't come from such, wealthy background or well-to-do background, is it?
Not really in that sense, because there was a lot of question, because my dad also wanted me because my dad's question was, why are you leaving this? And it's like opening up a new dukan, a new shop. Like, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
You have no money, you have no funding, do you think? And in fact, for the first 9-10 years, we had no funding. But in the early 90s, I don't know whether you're aware, there was one social worker by the name Sanjay Ghosh, who was a very well-known social worker in Assam, who died. He was kidnapped, and it's a very long story. It's a very sad story.
Okay.
And a week before he was kidnapped, I met him.
I see.
So Sanjay Ghosh, and those were the struggling years, my wife and I, when we were really struggling to run ECS. And I mean, who would come to Tuensang?
Yeah.
Of all the places.
Those days, especially.
And those days, and there was so much of conflict, firing, and ambushes happening. And no funder would want to come to a remote place like Tuensang. And those were really struggling years. And one of the things he said was, he said, Chingmak, I see that you're really struggling. But he also said, you just do what you have to do. You just close your eyes and do what you have to do. And if you think that's the right thing, then go where your heart leads. And he said, a time will come where you will not have to look for funding. Funding will come looking for you.
Wow.
So I think sustainability also depends on the kind of brand that you're trying to build.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The credibility.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, whether it's government or whether, okay, I have my share of struggles with the government.
Of course.
But even within the government, I've seen a lot of very good officers within government of Nagaland who have been able to see what we are trying to do and who have tried to side with us. So it is a struggle, and yet if you're invested, and I think that goes for anything.
True.
Whether you're opening a shop or that continuity and then the resilience and the way that you're putting the effort into, I think it pays off.
That's beautiful. In a way, it really makes me a little sentimental when you start sharing your stories on that. I think the struggles are real.
It is,
right? And at some point of time, you might be thinking, what am I really doing here?
Exactly.
Within that span of 10 years in your struggle days.
Yeah.
How did you cope yourself and, not to give up on the vision and maybe the passion that God gave you?
Yeah.
How did you manage to continue like in those struggling years?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important issue. See, when we were dealing, I think the intent is very important in anything that we do. Because when the intent is clear, then all these struggles and all of this, because you are seeing something and you're driven by that, that also brings in the passion to do that.
Right.
So that really drives you, like it's something which you cannot express, but it drives you. And it's a further fuel, because then you begin to see that, people's needs are there, people's issues are there. And there's also a lot of excitement. Because I've seen that you do more without money than with money. In fact, there's a classic thing with you see in government programs. Government programs have money, but there are no results.
Right.
And I think that is the sad part. But then when the intent is clear and you're driven by it, then you begin to see results. And when you see results, then, that adrenal rush is there to do more.
Right.
Because you are seeing, and you see that, like one example why government programs, or for that matter NGOs, fail is because I always give this example.
Okay.
If I say, hey, brother Lungleng, I'm coming to Kohima, I'm coming for dinner tomorrow night. When I invite myself for dinner to your place, you might even forget.
Yeah, true.
But if you say, hey, Chingmak, I heard you are in Kohima, can you come home? Now, when you are inviting, you will make sure that you cook the best and you're mentally prepared, you're waiting for me.
Correct.
And I think when we go to the community and when we fit into their design, when we are addressing a need that they're raising, it has more impact.
Absolutely.
And so in the struggling years, we began to see that we were not defining what they needed. We were just responding to their needs. And because we were responding to their needs, they were doing 70% of the work.
Yep.
We were just hardly doing 30% of the work because the initiative was theirs. And so for the government, I think this is where the government fails.
Yeah.
Or for most NGOs or most programs fail because we decide what people need.
Yeah, true.
We say this is what you need.
True.
Rather than the other way around. So I think that was one good thing with us, that we were driven by this idea that we have to just respond to what the needs are. And so we did not have money, we did not have resources, but 70-30% of that resources were coming.
Correct.
But then I think it's the excitement, because many a times, we were running this health center where the villages would take 60 kilometers to reach us. Whereas if we just build a 44-kilometer road and a bridge, the villages, the pregnant mother would reach a health center in just 15 minutes. And we asked the government, we went to so many people, nobody helped us. So we told the villagers, we'll dig our own road, we'll build our own bridge. In fact, one evening as the sun was setting, I was standing on the bridge and we were building the bridge, and I was asking myself, is this my work? Should I be building bridges? Should the government not build bridges?
Right.
Should the government not build the roads? There are frustrations, no doubt.
Sure.
And that goes without saying. But then when you find the enthusiasm of the villagers, because it is their road, it is their bridge, it is something that they wanted, that takes away all these questions that's there. So we have been responding to people's need, and they have been fueling the energy to do that. I think that is what gave us the motivation to continue what we are doing.
That's the right way of, I think, looking at when it comes to social work and any kind of community works.
Exactly.
I think, in my professional life, we did a lot of participatory rural appraisal, the PRA style, and bottom-up approach and this and that. I think that's the, of course, right way of looking at when you want to start working with community. And I like your idea, your shift from, working for the loss, working for the least, and the other
for the least, For the lost,
For
the
last
last,
and the least. Yes.
Yeah.
And now you have moved in, shifted away from, with the least, with the lost, and with the last. I think that's the exact way of, how we should work with people.
Exactly.
I mean, and for the lost, for the last, for the least, it comes like a savior, with that savior complex.
Yeah, I'm coming to help
you. But that will not work most of the time. I think that's what the government does.
Yeah.
But I think one work and model of work that really sets you apart is your PPP model, public-private partnership.
Exactly.
And like you said, government has the fund, but they don't have the operational commitment. Yeah. And you do not have the fund most of the time, but you have that commitment. So how did you first start your PPP model? I think you started with your health center.
Exactly.
Can you just shed light on that?
Yeah. So I think I would be proud to say that in the entire nation, in the whole of India, we run the only PHC where the doctor, nurses, lab technician, the cook, the janitor, and the ambulance driver.
That's from the government, right?
Yeah. Okay. Are nominated by the villagers and paid by NHM.
I see.
Yeah. So in a cluster of villages, around 40 children died. And we all got together and this whole debate came, what do we do? Because there was an epidemic and around 40 children died. And a whole lot of issues came up. Yeah. Nurses were not there, doctors were not there. So I remember we raised this issue with the government. And I remember inviting Sir Menacol John. And there was this one deputy director, one Dr. Kika. And they represented the health department. And we sat across like this, the community on one side. And we sat together and we told the government. And that's why I say we did have some good officers like Menacol John, where we said, sir, we said, even I want to run away from here. Your doctors and nurses will never come here. Yeah. It's so remote. It's one godforsaken place. Right. There's no electricity. The mobiles don't come here. No bridges, no roads. And these are going to take ages to come. So you also give up. You allow us to nominate our doctors. We'll get local doctors. We'll find the nurses. And this is where we got into a PPP mode. Now the difference here is government is government. Who gives a damn for the government? Yeah. Like, the government doesn't have a face. Yeah. So the doctor would come, would not come, the nurse will come, may not come. But then if I'm sitting across with the community and the doctor is being interviewed by the village health committee and the villagers are asking you, apni duty nakurili, if you don't work, what action do we take on you? And I remember the first doctor during the interview in front of the villagers, the doctor says, if I don't come for a week, you can chuck me off.
I see.
So the accountability was not the government but to the villagers.
True.
And I think that is how the hospital, in fact, see brother, I'll tell you, in fact, our PHCs have ambulance services, I think cut across Nagaland. This will be the only PHC where in 1 o'clock in the morning you can call up the PHC and the ambulance will come to pick you up. I don't think even in Kohima you call up an ambulance will come.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And it started, and generally our people are very creative. And now what is happening is we started making Ayushman functional, and because it's now becoming a revenue generating program, they've started a geriatric care program. So when the health centers became revenue generating, the community started their own program because they were addressing a need, that was felt. Right. So like elderly care, they started putting money into the elderly care program so that the elderly people come in batches for care to the primary health center. Sure. And they also invested in the villages so that the churches are also partners to this. So the cluster of 6-7 villages around there, you won't believe that every Monday there's a feeding time for the elderly people by the church.
Okay.
And if any of them don't turn up for the feeding, then they, the health center would send the ambulance and find out why they didn't come for the feeding.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so that's the elderly care program which the community has taken up.
So the feeding that you're talking about is the medical terms, or it's just actual food feeding?
Food,
Okay.
where the volunteers come, the nurses go
Right.
and provide medication and
Okay.
the profiling of the health. So there's a profile for every elderly person in that cluster of villages around the
I
PHC
see.
without a single paisa from government of Nagaland.
Wow.
Yeah, just through the revenue. So this is what we are trying to tell the government. If it's private, partnership with the community, there's so much.
Yeah.
See, the only issue is to what extent do you trust the community?
True.
True. And that's why these partnerships are very helpful for rural areas, because when communities are engaged, see, one thing with our Nagas is, generally our Nagas, we may have all our, pitfalls, and we may have our own baggages, but generally we Nagas are very honest people. If you're honest with them, they're the best people. Only thing is, we have to know that villagers are equally intelligent.
Yeah.
It's only when we question their intelligence,
Yeah.
that's where we fail, where the government, has failed. So I think in terms of policy also, when we have the strength of the community, I really don't understand why government does not want to invest in the community. Because when you're honest with the community, government puts 50 rupees, community will put 80 rupees.
Yep.
So I think a mindset has to change for a PPP to be really functional. And so this is where we are. Now we're gradually, so the government NHM has now, sort of opened up to our idea of expanding to more primary health centers. And so this is where we're working.
That's only in Tuensang, in your area, right? In other districts, NHM, do they really work with, do they really work with a community like that in the same model you are working with?
I am not aware of the other NGOs, but with NHM we have expanded into Mon, we have expanded into like very remote places like Changlangshu, like Mopong.
Right.
In fact, Changlangshu Primary Health Center has been winning the best primary health center. They call it the Kaya Kalpa Award.
Wow.
They have been winning the award since 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And
that's in Changlangsu.
That's in Tobu Block.
Double block, right? Right.
And then Mopong Primary Health Center won the best Ayushman Award, the entire Nagaland,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they bought their own ultrasound machine, they bought their own ambulance, and so the community is able to address their issues, put an additional nurse, put an additional cook, and devise their own creativity, because you have this pool of money which you have generated through the primary health center. So I think this is really the way to go, I feel, for Nagas.
Okay.
Putting really the emphasis on strengthening community.
Now that you mentioned that government why you don't understand why government is not investing so much as needed in the community.
Yeah.
There is a policy known as Communitization Act of 2002.
Yeah.
Since despite the act in place,
Yes.
you think it's not sufficiently working, or how is your impression on that?
See, sometimes I feel this Communitization Act as a concept, maybe it was a grand idea in the head of some big people up there.
Right.
I don't think Nagas or the various departments, education department, health, I don't think they really embraced it. The envisioning part wasn't there, I feel. As a concept, maybe we won awards. Yeah. But then, did everyone envision?
Exactly.
Do we really believe? You have to believe what you're doing.
Exactly.
And so you find that, governments have come and gone, but they haven't invested even a paisa on communitization. They have not invested.
I see.
It's a process that you have to invest where, we give the power to the community.
And I think and trust is the spirit that should move in this concept, right?
Exactly. In any relationship, right?
Right. But I think, I don't know how you really experience, but from the little experience that I have working with community in Nagaland, I feel that there is a trust deficit between the community and the government.
Exactly.
And now I want to understand from you how you were able to convince the community that, hey, we want to work for you, we want to work with you, and we need your genuine contribution to this.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is busy with their own lives.
Yeah.
How do you think they were able to pull together their resources and everything, their time, everything, and just be part of it?
Yeah.
How did you make it?
See, I'll just be blunt.
Yeah.
I told the villagers, the community, I said, the government will never come to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to be the government.
Okay.
I think that was something I tried to drum into their head, so that you don't wait for something which will never happen. I mean, government is government; it'll happen in its own time.
Right.
Government comes, they change. Policy comes, they change. And so, I think where we started investing was for them to say, "Look, the school is yours. The hospital is for you. If it's not functioning, you got to make it happen."
True.
And I think that was the selling point, especially in the eastern part of Nagaland where we were working. And then they started putting their money. And see, it's only when you put your money into it, then your heart goes into it.
True.
And then you question because your money has been put there.
Exactly.
Your time has been put in there. How do you know if you don't put your time?
True.
So that was the only way out. We just have to be very blunt and tell them, look, you waited. Even my hair is growing grey. I've waited for the government. The roads will always be like this. Why don't we do what we have to do?
That's very interesting. It reminds me of the reason why we don't give much attention to how the government is spending our money.
Yeah.
It's because we don't pay tax. Maybe.
Exactly.
So when we don't pay tax, no one bothers us how the money is being spent. But if we are taxpayers, definitely Nagas will be even more questioning how the government is spending.
Exactly.
I think that same concept definitely goes with the community, right?
Exactly.
Like you rightly mentioned.
Yeah.
I think, what if certain districts want to come up with the similar models of working with the community and, with like the NHM that you're doing?
Yeah.
Do you think it will be replicable, that kind of model?
I feel if you look at our Naga society, I mean, it's amazing if you go to Naga Burma, that the traditional Naga villages are so self-sufficient. Sometimes I feel absence of government is also a blessing because they have no one to depend on but themselves. So you find that the barns are filled for 2-3 years. They have pigs. If something fails, then there's another thing to replace that. And they're so isolated, and so they're so insulated, and they've figured out how to run their own. So that has been the way we Nagas were. So I feel it will be replicable.
I see.
Only issue is lately the community fabric is slowly breaking away. But again, I always say this, that with mental health issues coming up, I think this is the time to rebuild community. There's this African saying which says that it takes an entire village to nurture a child. Right? And that's so much how the Naga village was, around the murung, around the community, around the church. And so we have a church we have a platform like the church, where I think it's now time for us to redefine community,
right,
before it really fades away. And I think this is like a huge opportunity for us, not to look at mental health issue as a setback, but then make it as a rallying point for the church, for the tribal, for all of us to come together and say, hey, let's address this issue by redefining community. And I think this is an opportunity where we can work around it. And I feel across Naga villages, the only thing is, again, the crux of it is you have to come very honest, very monsapa, and that not only Naga, anyone will buy, when you go with that open book. And I think it should work. it will be replicable anyway. I think that's possible.
I think, like you mentioned, one thing I like about Naga people is we are honest, and we don't intend to manipulate others.
Exactly.
Normally.
Yeah.
So if people come with honest, gesture, and
Yeah.
we take even 10 times more steps to be honest with those
Exactly.
people normally.
Exactly.
I think you have really harnessed that, beautiful trait of the Naga people as such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think we Nagas have to realize that tomorrow the sun will rise, 5 o'clock. Why were we hoarding as though sun will not rise tomorrow? Right?
What do you mean by that?
I'm saying God will provide for
Right.
each day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are hoarding as though there's no tomorrow.
I'm sure.
And that is where we're not willing to share. We're not willing to work for the good. We're not willing to work for posterity. We're not willing to work for future. The idea of sharing, I think this is not happening because, this is where we are. That's the so unfortunate thing. Whether if you look at the politics around it, if you look at the government, if you look at individuals or whatever. So I think this is where that shift in mindset is so very important for us in today's time.
Right. Having a person and having an entity or non-political organization like yours,
Yeah.
contributing effectively to the community, to the social life, to the people is very, very important.
Yeah.
But you also need the support and back of the government as well.
Exactly.
In the meantime. So the ideal way to look at it for development is, having to work all this like-minded together, backed by the government.
Exactly.
So how do you look at the political influence when it comes to development or how do you assess the political situation of Nagaland? Example, you being from the eastern side.
Yeah.
Your eastern area has been also demanding for separate statehood and separate autonomous, a power that they want to enjoy when it comes to finance.
Yeah.
Do you think those things will really take away the development deficits that the eastern people have? I don't want to sound political. I don't want you to answer political also, but as someone who has really worked with people, how do you view that?
See, if you, of course, it's a very hypothetical way of analyzing it.
Right.
So if you look at Article 371A, one is for Nagaland, but if you look at Article 371A2, it's all about Tuensang. And one has to accept the fact that Nagas the Western Nagas were Nagas under Assam, and the Eastern Nagas were Nagas under NEFA, Northeastern Frontier Agency. I think we forget the fact that for 3 years, it was called Naga Hills, Tuensang area.
Right.
For 3 years.
Right.
So that is the genesis. Nagaland came much later on. The genesis was Nagas who were part of Assam and Nagas who were part of NEFA. And it's very intelligently put where they said there will be equitable distribution of resources.
I see.
So if you go by any indicators, it was not equitable distribution. Like if you look at jobs, hardly there would be 10% in eastern part of Nagaland who hold the job. So you really can't say equitable. If you go by, the number of nurses, the number of doctors, I can go on and on. It hasn't been equitable. So I really cannot answer that question. But if it was equitable, and if you had the resources, I think they would have done better. So it's from that premise of inequitable distribution. I think this is where you find the development gap. Yeah. And unfortunately, across the world, I don't blame government of Nagaland. Across the world, work starts at the center, and by the time it reaches the fringes, nothing happens. It dies down. I wish development work started from the fringes and it came to the center. Then you might see some impact. So I think it's the level of education, because it's like trying to compare, two different paradigms. If you look at the whole of Western Nagaland, we're talking about Christianity which was there almost 200 years. Education came with Christianity. Printing press came with Christianity. Hospital came with Christianity.
True.
And then if you look at the churches in the East, you find that, by 1872, the British were already there. The British never got to come to the eastern part of Nagaland. So which means education did not come.
Right.
Yeah. So equitable distribution is the ideal situation. But I wish there was an effort that it was beyond equitable distribution, saying that you are backward, you're 100 years behind education, so we will put more here, The whole approach should have been that way.
Equity.
Yeah.
Idea of equity, right?
In that sense, equity, yeah. So I just want all of us to relook at Article 371 and not just read the first part, but read the other half where there is that mention of equity, equitable distribution of resources, yeah.
Wow. I think that totally makes sense. I think some will argue that that's exactly why the backward quota is given to some tribes. So I think, but it's just in terms of government job reservation.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to a lot of amenities, I mean, there's a sense that there's no equitable distribution, of course.
Exactly.
I mean, some policies are made by people from the center. Center is in the heart of the, policy making area, like Kohima, for example, the Western Nagaland. So automatically, that policy will, at the end of the day, benefit those who make them, who make the policy first.
Yeah.
I think it's high time to look at, from that point of view that you just mentioned. Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, I also blame our politicians who represent the Eastern Nagaland, These are the guys who have to make voice,
Right.
These are the guys who should have made voice. They should have brought the plans, the policies and all of that. And I think the politicians who represent the eastern part of Nagaland have also failed in that sense of not being able to really represent the issues and concerns. So that goes without saying. But at the same time, I think, the other issue is also, that's the other setback of the tribal politics which is there.
Right.
I see my tribe, you see your tribe,
Right.
and I don't see beyond my tribe. So I think that harms all of us, not only Eastern Nagaland, but then,
the Naga people as a whole.
As a whole, yeah.
Yeah, that has really crippled us in many ways.
Exactly.
I think, when I look at your career, you were a theologian. I mean, you still are a theologian.
Yeah.
And like you said, everyone expected of you that you would come back one day and maybe see our Chang representative being the head of NPCC one day. That would be definitely your community's dream as well.
Yeah.
And then, but you moved into social work, community engagement, all of this work.
Exactly.
And you have been successfully doing that. I think, we haven't seen it when it comes to social work who has done as much as you have. That's something I want to really compliment you on that. Okay, but now looking beyond that, has your community or has your people ever come forward and approached you to at least look at from a political perspective as well to start working on that? Do you intend one day that, you will represent your people in the way they should be represented as a politician?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought that?
No, that issue have always been there.
Okay.
Yeah, from various angles but I see very little room in that because I've seen that in my dad.
Okay.
Yeah, because as long as the system of election, there is this saying. I never used to understand this saying. It's an African saying which says, when the students are ready, then the teacher will come. I never really understood. In other words, when the students are really willing to learn, then the real teacher will arise. So unless Naga community understand what is local democracy, unless people understand how democratic systems function, getting the right people is not really the solution. Getting the right kind of leadership. In fact, only the wrong kind of leadership will come. But when there's an aware community, an educated community, when people are ready, now we really need a good leader, then it creates space for right people to come. I think we're climbing the wrong tree by looking at good people to be leaders.
True.
And that goes without saying. That's equally important.
Right.
But I think it has to work the other way around. When people come together and say, I'm not selling my vote, we're just going to have people who will serve us. Then you will have the right people coming who will not waste money. Because now you need 5-6 crores to win an election, and there's no way you can recover that money.
As a clean politician, you will never recover that.
There's no way. Exactly.
So I think it's rather saddening to learn the new developments in the society. I think that really makes sense when people have to be first ready for good leadership, for the right leadership. And I think at the end of the day, people dictate the system that we want to build.
Exactly.
Now, moving on from here, I mean, how, as personally, like, do you have that peace of mind that, that peace that many people don't enjoy in their profession? Nowadays, mental health, I mean, our profession and occupation that we engage in is one of the reasons people are going through a lot of stress nowadays. Even in the cities, or maybe in the case of Nagaland as well. So I want to understand the kind of the job satisfaction that you have in the work that you have been doing for the last, more than, 3 decades. How are you assessing yourself when it comes to yourself, your personal peace, and all of that?
See, very honestly, I wouldn't want my kids to be in social work.
Just like you.
It's a very difficult work. It's very challenging. You have to raise support. You have to raise your own financing. And even if you are doing with the best of intent, you can get misunderstood. You can be questioned. So in many ways, it's a very thankless job. And then it takes a lot of your time from your family. You end up becoming all things to all man, that you really have very little private space. And you have, in other words, you become a people's person. So that's the other side, which really saps a lot of my energy, or it's very demanding emotionally from that sense. And you may get accused for the wrong reasons, things you have not done, and those are the things. But at the end of the day, that it's impacting people. That. So next morning you wake up with that sense of that same energy and the same peace to continue doing it, because you know that it has its own impact. It has its own place. And so this is, I think, the most satisfying thing. Because when you go to the villages, when you sit with the villagers, when you're engaging with the people, and then out of nowhere someone comes up and says, I'm praying for you, we are praying for you. That's something which, I think most of the things, the most important things in life, we can't buy with money.
True.
True. The most crucial things, and that is something that you get, and that's the sense of peace that you get out of doing the kind of work that we do. So that, in that sense, it's very satisfying. But it's a very difficult journey. It's not easy, but it's very, how do I say? It is very, what's the right word? Enriching journey. In that sense.
But at any point of time, have you ever thought, when you face a problem, this is the problem I have not really hoped to come across, and no one has even asked me to take up this challenge. You are creating this problem for yourself, which no one has asked, and you're adding stress to your life sometimes. Because I'm sure there will be a lot of time where you had this stress at the same time. When you had to carry out a lot of things. So did you question at any point of time no one asked me to do this, but I'm doing, but I'm facing the own problem that I have created by myself.
That happens quite often. But at the same time, you tend to take ownership for that.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. When you take ownership, that so with my children, I've learned not to say what you have to do, what you don't have to do, because I want my children to also take ownership for their career in life, to choose. And when you choose to do what you do, you also take the risk for it.
Yeah.
You begin to understand that this is part of the package. It's not just the praises, the accolade, or the awards that you win, but this also comes with the package.
True.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. This is part of the package. And then when you're able to do that, because you know that it's for the benefit of someone, it's for the benefit of the community, like for example, even with the government, I tend to end up being on the wrong side of the government. I tend to sometimes say no to what they want. And so even within the government, I found that people who align with the way we work are the ones who come to us.
I see.
Yeah. And who are not very aligned to us, they don't come to us, or, no matter how much we knock at the door, they wouldn't open the door. So these are some of the lessons that we learn. So I think when these issues come, when you know that this is my own creation, and this was because I wanted it this way, then I think it makes it much more lighter and more palatable. Yeah,
I think that's very beautifully put it. I think there are a lot of youngsters, even in our context nowadays, who want to do things differently from what the society has structured for them.
Exactly.
Has designed for them. So my fear is that when they start doing it, they will face a lot of problems.
Exactly.
And the stress unnecessarily for the stress that they have created, and no one has asked them to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So I want to understand, and I think you have really put it well, that you start taking ownership.
Yeah.
And you start finding a way to resolve it.
Exactly.
I think that's very beautiful in a way. I think I want to understand, what is your long-term goal from now? You have been doing this amazing works. Now, what is that goal that you're looking forward to? That will make you really happy, or in a sense more satisfied in life.
Yeah. So before going to that, the ending that you ended with on that note about young people.
Yeah. Right.
And I just want to stress on that for young people. See, our Nagas have to understand that perpetually, we Nagas society is going to be a patriarchal society. It's going to be hierarchical. It's going to be imperialistic. The elders will be on the top. See, my gray hair. I'm getting acceptance only now when I'm having gray hair.
Okay.
And once we accept the fact that this is a structure, as long as we are Nagas, there's going to be patriarchy. As long as Naga, it's going to be very imperialistic. There are going to be hierarchies, Then we begin to accept the challenges, and we know that this is part of it, that we have to face. And then, but our Naga people are also, when you are proving, and when you're not giving up, and when you're sustaining the effort that you're putting in, they're very open to you. And that's the other, thing that I see in Naga society. When they see that you're really struggling, you're sweating out, and, in all earnestness that you're working, they will even give a lending hand. So I think for young people, that's one thing that we have to keep in mind from day one, that as long as we are Nagas.
That's encouraging.
This is something which we have to live with.
Right.
And there's a room for that also. And so that's why I say, even with grey hair, I'm struggling to gain acceptance.
Okay.
So it will be even more difficult for you as a young person. Yeah.
I can imagine that.
Yeah. So that is one thing. Moving ahead, one of the things is, see, I make a lot of short videos and I put it up. Okay. And then I tend to show only what has worked. I tend to not show what has not worked. And so if there were 100 failures, there were just one success.
Right.
And I tend to, take that one success. And
Yeah, absolutely.
But then on the other hand, we are trying to see what has worked, and we really want to expand those. And coming back to community and community engagement, community participation, this is one of the messages that I want to really take across all our Naga areas, not only in Nagaland, but across Nagaland, to say, hey, the community has to come together. We Nagas were always community driven. Why wait for government? Why wait for outside help? And I just want to really take this message and say, if it has worked with Eastern Nagaland in few pockets, it'll really work across Naga areas. And this is something that I'm working. In fact, I'm cutting down my work so that, before I'm too old, that I'm able to move around and see how I can inspire many more communities to take up similar work.
Thanks for laying that out. I mean, it's the reality of our society.
Exactly.
Age comes with respect as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
respect comes with age.
Respect comes with age. Yeah, that's true. In other ways,
unfortunately. Yeah.
But the other positive points is that our people are at the same time very supportive.
Exactly.
When you are genuine and when you're honest in your work.
Yeah. They'll speak up for you.
True. I think that's very encouraging, I would say. Now, when it comes to the function of a church, and you are also actively involved with the church, may not be directly, but indirectly, you are a churchman as well.
Yeah.
And you are a pastor too.
Yeah.
And more than that, you are a doctorate in theology, and I think you have gone to the let's say the highest level from both ends, social as well as theological.
Exactly.
How do you assess the role of? I want to understand from a person like you. I mean, when we think about church and faith and society, our contribution is only we go totally blind of what the society needs. And
exactly.
I think that's my impression, that we tend to think our faith in terms of just you and heaven.
Exactly.
I mean, but you are doing totally opposite to that. But of course, not in contradictory with the faith and the doctrinal things. If I were to go on that.
Yeah.
How is your view on the role of forget the church for now, the role of a Christian man and woman in vis-a-vis our social responsibility?
Yeah.
I think you are the best example to that, and I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah. See, I think let's start with the Lord's Prayer. I think we Nagas have all memorized the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven though prithivite aivi. And I think Christian citizenship is what we have not understood. I think that's the primary role which the church has also failed. We're all heaven driven. And we're not really bothered about what happens around. But the Lord's Prayer itself is to bring God's kingdom down to earth as it is in heaven. In other words, we are called to make Nagaland like heaven. Now, how many of us have really understood the Lord's Prayer from that perspective, to bring God's kingdom into the world and make Nagaland like heaven? I mean, look at Nagaland. We're just 2 million. I mean, how difficult is it to change Nagaland?
Right.
This is one thing that I don't understand. The church also doesn't understand the immense opportunity it has. It's such a huge platform, the church. Even our chief minister, Rio, does not have a platform like the pastor. Every morning, the church will be packed, and they're going to sit silently in front of this pastor, who is going to, even the chief minister will be in front of him.
Right.
And the pastor has this huge opportunity to influence the ministers, the bureaucrats, the engineers, the technocrats who are coming there. And that's the kind of, in fact, if a pastor says, if you're not doing your duty well, if your wealth is ill-gotten, please don't bring your tithes here. I mean, that's going to bring a change, that's going to make a whole, paradigm shift in the way you look at the church, rather than making it like a social platform. Unfortunately, our churches are like a social platform. It's just another murung. I come on Sunday, I come in my best Sunday best. I look at you, you look at me. and then we exchange our, good mornings and we part. It's just another social platform.
Mm-hmm.
But can the church question your motive? Can the church question your intent?
Absolutely.
And can it become a powerful platform to do that?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where I sometimes feel it's a wasted opportunity for the church for not being able. So a lot of people do not really understand when they say Nagas are 90%, 99% Christians, and when they see so much of corruption, they just cannot weigh the two.
True.
How can it be? When everyone is a Christian, how come our roads are like this? How come our bridges are like this? They just cannot 2 + 2,
Right.
put it together.
Right.
So I think that's where we either have to question our way of belief, our Christianity, and see how the church can play its role. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Every single person in Nagaland known for implementation of any project, any infrastructural development, is a member of a church.
Exactly.
So maybe the church is failing its responsibility as a church.
Yeah.
So that can also be another conclusion.
Exactly.
So I think, taking the overhaul of this, the church transformation will also take time.
Exactly.
Maybe the church will look at it as a church with out of reverence, but it may not necessarily be filled with people who are well equipped as Christians or as priests, or in that sense. So how do you transform the church then if the church is failing its duties? That's
I think the whole theological curriculum needs to
okay,
because most theological institutions which are aligned to mainland India are talking about casteism, or are talking about Dalits, or are talking about so my theological training was around that. It wasn't so much about understanding tribalism,
right?
How did tribes evolve, how clans evolved, and how do we connect that with the scripture? How does word become flesh again, as in John chapter 1? How do we make it flesh? How do we make it relatable? I think that is where we have not been able to really train the church leadership in being able to transpose those learnings and bringing it to the church. So I think this is one gap which also needs to be addressed, so that and I think the right kind of people needs to be in the church, because it is such a platform which commands so much of respect.
True.
Yeah, and so the leadership of the church has to be that much more intelligent, that much more committed.
True.
Yeah. So in theological training, the institutes are not very bothered about your personal life.
Okay.
They're just there to give you academic career.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the whole training process has to, So I think churches should start hunting for young people who are committed and train those people who will come back to the church. In fact, I tell a lot of churches, why don't you raise a special scholarship fund, set it aside. And in sports, they have this phrase called catch them young tournament.
Right.
Catch people who are young and who are energetic, who are in the church, who can give. Because in most villages, my programs has been successful where the pastor was very progressive. In fact, it was the other way around, not the village council chairman. In fact, where the church was strong and vibrant, those are villages where our programs were successful.
Right.
So I think for the Naga context, be it in Manipur or Arunachal, I think even for the government, I think the message is to make use of this platform.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something to really, really think about, I think.
Exactly,
people need to digest that a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, another topic to discuss.
Yeah. I think, maybe on the concluding note, you are as one person who has seen the rural reality, the remoteness of the people, and the rurality of, the reality of the rural context. At the same time, the most developed, you have associated, not directly, but you have encountered with a lot of people at the policy level also. So what concerns me as a development professional at the same time is how to bridge this gap between the policy and the rural, context, so that the policy serves the relatable in a very relatable manner to the needs of the people. We make policies in the assembly and so on, but I think at the end of the day, it's most of the policies that we frame as a state or as a country, it's not relatable most of the time. Like at the end of the day, it's like people who end up doing most of the work in a very successful manner, not the government. So if there has to be one policy suggestion that you would like to bring out strongly for the government as well as for the people to understand, what is it that you have been thinking about?
So one of the things that we have been trying is with the government, which we were not very successful, was to conduct reviews at the community level
of any implementation.
Wow. I think that's really to give you a pulse of what's happening.
Something like a social audit. Okay.
Where so one of the things, in fact, I've been toying this idea with a lot of these policy makers to say, let's do away with all these fancy programs.
Right.
Let's just lit a fire,
right.
Sit around the fire, like in a Naga kitchen, and why don't we sit and get to understand? Because see, innovation comes, your innovation will depend on how much you are exposed to the community. And when you're in the community, that's where you get your ideas. That's where you get your innovations. I've seen that with my colleagues also. Colleagues who bring up with ideas after ideas are people who are mostly engaged in the field, who are with the community. Because we give one ideas, villagers expand it into 3-4 ideas, because for them it's their life. And because it's their life, they have the solution.
True.
And so the quality of the discussion in the assembly, the quality of the debates within the department will be that much more enriched when they have the boots on the ground, when their ears are on the ground. And so this is one thing which we are trying to tie up and with various departments to tell our bureaucrats to say, why don't you come to the village? In fact, some of them are willing to come, where we bring all the community leaders and we sit and get a sense of, and so much, and so when they go back, that would really enhance the quality of, in terms of what kind of solutions, what kind of policies to build around that.
I think it's high time. It's high time our policy comes down to the ground level.
Exactly.
And designed for them, not just sitting in the air-conditioned room and just plan out everything for them.
Exactly.
I think this has been a very enriching conversation. I think too less time to talk.
Thank you so much.
Many things, wonderful works that you have been doing. I think I hope we get more time to talk in the future about specifically about on thematic areas that we choose to talk. It'll be very helpful. I think many of our viewers also, young people, like between 21 to 36, 37 years of age, mostly. So I'm sure this will also really help them define the meaning of their life, at the same time what they are, maybe or maybe destined to do in life. I think personally it really helps me it makes me stronger in my conviction of what I want to do in life as well. Looking at your life, looking at the work that you are doing, looking at the conviction that you have in your life, and
thank you so much.
Life that you're living. Thank you so much for being that person in a society like ours.
Thank you so much.
Where everyone runs towards a government job, where everyone runs towards social dignity and so on. I think you have been that person who comes like a breath of fresh air for young people like us.
Thank you so much.
Please continue doing what you have been doing.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming as well.
Thank you.
We'll talk again.
Yeah.